Hello and welcome to the Dittonworks YouTube channel. I've just had Postman Pat deliver a little box, so I thought I would do the first bit, unboxing, on camera, because I'm going to be listening to them all today, which is Monday, all through Tuesday, and then I will shoot the review on Wednesday. So my favourite, small speakers. Right, let's put this down. There we have the Minimo 2 from Ophidian with their revolutionary port technology. Wednesday is here. If you go on Ophidian's website, on the About Us section, it basically says that they were founded in 2011 and their mission statement was to build quality British loudspeakers that outperformed their physical size. And a little bit about mini monitors. So, for many years, the Celestion A compacts have been my loudspeakers. They've served duties on home cinema rears. They've been now on the AV as sort of TV speakers on the AV. I've used them on the hi-fi. They have been with me for years and I love them. And some of the reason for that, albeit that they do sound good, but I think there's a little bit of a psychological thing that sometimes with very small loudspeakers, you're just in sensory overload. You're shocked that the sound that is coming from some of these very small loudspeakers. Now, as much as I love the Celestion A compacts, they're actually bigger than these little Ophidian loudspeakers by a fair way. These are really small. So let's have a chat about the physical dimensions, the technologies involved, and then we'll talk about how they sound. So what we have is a 4.5-inch bass driver with quite a thick rolled surround. Now, the purpose of that is that's going to keep that cone well in check when it's really extending backwards and forwards. It's got about a 1-inch voice coil, but it's a 4-layered voice coil, and they have quite a large ferrite magnet for this size drive unit. If we move up here, this is the CAS 27mm HF unit, which has a special coating on it that they call Sonolex. And I've got to say, this is a really fantastic sounding tweeter. A little bit more about that in a minute. What makes these quite unique is this sort of grille port at the back on this rather nice terminal plate with the input terminals there. Now, Ophidian, they call that AEROFLEX. And what I think it is rather than that being just a straight port, like we have on these, which is just a straight port into the cabinet. And there's just something I want to mention about this. So if we look, the bass driver is there, the port is there. Some of the sound waves from the top section of the cone, backward firing sound, is coming straight out of the port. And as good as these are, at elevated volumes you can find a little bit of port chuffing. That's basically where there's turbulence in the port, that there's air stuck, if you like, in the port, and the next wave of air is hitting it and causing turbulence. That's essentially port chuffing. Now, the very worst case of that would have been on one of my first pairs of mini monitors, the Wharfedale Diamonds, that the port chuffing got so intense it actually slowly worked the port out of the box and I had to glue them in. You won't get such an effect on these little things. This isn't a standard port. It's more of a channel, I suppose, is the best way of describing it, because if you look up in through this slot, you can see that the port is traveling up here somewhere. So it's almost like a transmission line. It's not a transmission line. It's almost like that. So what you're having is the sound pressure waves are having to travel through almost like a labyrinth. And that is obviously going to have an effect on the sound waves, but importantly for us, it has an effect on the bass. There is no port chuffing. I couldn't detect any at all. It really works. So how did these come into my peripheral and then ultimately into my vision? At the last hi-fi show I went into Ophidian's room, and they had their flagship speakers there, the Voodoo, which I just in terms of eye candy was stunning. And I had a look at those and they just ticked all the boxes for me. They looked a knockout, had very nice drive units in them, and the only drawback is they're too big for my room. So I did contact Ophidian and asked if it would be okay for me to review some of their smaller speakers. And what they've sent me is their smallest speaker. And I really like that. I absolutely love small mini monitors. And I think it is because of that psychological effect they can have. And it only works if they're good. If they're not a good little mini monitor and they're very thin and don't have a lot of oomph behind them, you just think, yeah, that's a small speaker. That's not in the case with this. These sound enormous. So their mission statement on their website about the restrictions of physical size, they've completely and utterly achieved that as far as I'm concerned. A little bit about fit and finish. Excellent veneer. These ones are obviously in an oak finish. And what I really like, a lot of manufacturers are now using magnetic grills to neaten up the baffles. But these little magnets are inside the grill, and they clip to the Allen bolts on the front. And it's very easy to get them off. You've also got a nice protective grill over this HF unit. That's always handy. Now, it's not the end of the world on a soft dome tweeter because you can quite easily get those back into shape. But it's still nice to have that protection there because little fingers do like to poke in tweeters. Let's have a chat about the sound because that's probably what everybody's most interested in. So how do the Minimo 2 sound? My main loudspeakers are what I would consider quite large two-way stand mount speakers. So the obvious thing with physics is the bigger they are, the more impact, the more bass, the more presence they have in the room. The cones are able to shift more air, thus increasing sound pressure level in the room. Sometimes with smaller loudspeakers they do sound a little weak and can feel a bit lost in the room, and you lose all of that sense of scale, and to be honest with you, they seem quite a shock going from them to something really small. And that isn't the case with these speakers from Ophidian. Their mission statement is absolutely on the money with these, because I was shocked, absolutely shocked. The amount of bass that they can produce is absolutely awe-inspiring. Taking into account you don't have any of that port chuffing issues, the bass is very good, very good. I was really surprised by this. HF, now this is interesting. HF is really nicely balanced, and it's in a way easier to get two drive units that are of similar size to cohesively blend together. And being a smaller bass driver going up to that 27mm CAS unit, you've just got a really nice blend going on there. So the crossover's working really well. How that affects the sound is you have a very smooth, very nice, no fatigue, subtle HF, which is full of detail. It gives you all the information you could possibly need, but not at the cost of hurting your ears. That is often my experience with soft dome tweeters. Some people absolutely 100% prefer a metal dome tweeter, but if that's not done right, they can sound a little bit shrill and a little bit hard. and ultimately start to fatigue your ears. That is not the case with these in any way. Very, very pleasant. Now the biggest bonus for me, and one of the reasons I thoroughly enjoy small loudspeakers, is the way they image. If you sit in a near field position and you've got them towed in, dialed in properly, all set up, and you sit there, it sounds like you're wearing the best pair of open back headphones you've ever heard in your life. It's immersive and it's very, very good. I was well impressed with the overall capabilities of these really quite small loudspeakers. In a way, they are a tad small for this room, but I could get away with it. I certainly didn't feel the need to add any additional active subwoofers, and I certainly didn't sit there and think, oh, there's not enough bass. There was plenty, absolutely plenty. They were really, really good. They sounded far bigger. I would imagine if I could have blindfolded somebody, sat them down, listened to them, and then they took the blindfold off, they wouldn't have believed that that was the sound coming from these tiny little loudspeakers. One other thing I need to mention is the stand height. So when I was playing these, I only have, or the tallest stands I have, are 60 centimetre lead-filled stands, target stands. And I've got to say that I don't think they were tall enough. I couldn't quite get these to ear level. This HF unit was below ear level. So what I did, which wasn't ideal, is I then put some books on the stands and then put the speakers on the books and raised it up to about 70 centimetres, and that put them much closer to ear level, and that drastically improved the sound quality. The HF was so much better. The imaging was better. Everything was improved by doing this. So it's worth noting that these do need to be on slightly taller than what most of us are used to with 2A stand mount speakers. The average usually is about 60 centimetres. Some of the bigger ones are on 45 centimetres. I would say you would need realistically a good 10 centimetres more at about 70 centimetres. I haven't checked what Ophidian Audio recommend, but in my experience playing about with them in here, I preferred the sound with them slightly more elevated. Now, something else you could do with these, I don't ever recommend putting speakers that close to the wall, but if you've got very restricted space, you could try these on wall brackets, and I don't think you would suffer with any ill effects because this port technology works fantastically well. I haven't tried it, it's only a hypothesis, but that would be another way of getting them at the correct level for you in whatever environment you were using them in, because 60 centimetres was just a tad too low in this room. Furthermore, other areas where these loudspeakers would work really well, and I tried, was on a home cinema setup. Now, I don't have a 5.1 setup anymore, I'm just literally running 3.0. I don't need a subwoofer and I don't have the extra rears. This room wouldn't allow me to do that very well, but I did try them on the left and right, and they can handle the dynamics and the impact, the slam that often occurs in movies. So if you take into account dramatic music scenes, explosions, all kinds of things, action sequences, these dealt with that incredibly well. So I would imagine that if you had a full 5.1 setup and you were going to run the larger version of these on the front, these would make exceptionally good rears. That's what my A compacts used to be, home cinema rears. And as much as I love the A compacts, I've got to say the Ophidian Audio, in my opinion, was a superior loudspeaker. It's taken all this time for me to find something that I thought was really a lot better. I tried the KEF LS50 and I still preferred my little A compacts. And the odd thing there is the LS50 was voiced, modelled using the A compact as reference. So that's kudos, in my opinion, to Ophidian Audio, that for me, that tiny little loudspeaker has actually managed to surpass my beloved A compacts. They would work extremely well on an AV setup and they work phenomenally well in a hi-fi setup. So if you were restricted by space or had to sit in a near field position, these little speakers are absolutely a knockout. phenomenal levels of bass. It's just almost laughable that you sit back and you think, what? From those? But I think it's because you can run them at elevated volume because you're not getting any horrible port chuffing. The bass is just kept in check and it just keeps driving and driving and driving. What phenomenal technology, very clever. Anyway guys, that's the Dittonworks video review of the Ophidian Minimo 2s, which are 40 to 80 watts, 4 ohm loudspeakers. I wouldn't say they're horrifically inefficient, they're quite easy to drive. And a little bonus for me is at 4 ohms it takes my 200 watt amplifier to 400 watts per channel. So I'm able to give that an enormous amount of wallop, which these will handle. They really don't mind being played loud whatsoever. The only people who might are the neighbours. Anyway guys, take care, I'll speak to you soon.